Yo guys, welcome to The Last Lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it.
At the end of the day, what can happen is and we can, as human beings, we can have an influence on how it pans out, are the rules and regulations around this sport. And I did want to touch on some comments that were made prior to this weekend at the start. Lewis Hamilton specifically talking about some changes potentially, and I got some headlines because obviously Max was like, well, we weren't saying this when Mercedes were leading, which
and then the Hamilton fans on came out with the receipts.
Yeah, I was going to say, it happens from both sides, doesn't it?
But regardless, I think ultimately whoever's mouth whether it comes from Lewis or Nick de Vries, sorry Kiera, regardless, do you think what Lewis was suggesting is that development on next year's car can't begin until a certain point, so it stops Red Bull from just chilling with this year's car and getting an advantage going into next year by starting earlier, I guess.
It's a weird one. I understood where Lewis was coming from, and I kind of get the point he's making, but ultimately, if he was in the dominant car, I'm not sure he'd be saying that. And we get this all that but
regardless of that, is it a good idea? Because whoever it comes from.
I actually like it. I like the idea just purely because
I want to debate the merit of the idea.
It's a difficult one because if you make a car that's so good, you technically should be allowed that I don't know how to describe it, but you've done so well that you've made a good car. You should then be allowed to work on a car earlier because of how well you've done. You should be given that opportunity.
You've earned that advantage.
You've earned that advantage because of how good the car was this year, for example. But obviously, I think it would stop or try to temper eras of dominance. And I think that's quite a big thing for Formula One and quite a big thing for Formula One's image right now. Is that we've not really had since 2009, we've not had a single period that's had multiple winners. It's been Red Bull, Mercedes, then back to Red Bull again for long periods of time. Yeah. And I think that would temper that just a little bit because you can't just go, right, cool, we're 3 races in, we've got this wrapped up, let's build the next one. Do you know what I'm saying? So
I think so. And I think if you look at it plain black and white, that is what we're trying to stop. We're trying to stop the dominance eras in a way because so many people are complaining about it. And obviously it's always different because, when Mercedes were dominant, it was
it's so ironic, by the way, that it is coming from Lewis.
Yeah.
As much as I love it is really ironic coming from him because that is just...
It could be something to look into. It may not change things, it may not, but if you just give a cut-off point, with the season prior being right, for next season, you start at this date, kind of similar to how they're capping budgets, just cap a date in a way. Just cap it at this date, you then start. It could do something. It might not even do anything. You just don't know.
It's really hard to police, by the way.
I was just about to say, how would you even police
going
that?
Around
how would you... Who says what a new car is?
What the fuck is that for? Is that for this car or next year?
Exactly.
What's the skew?
But that's the thing. How would you even know? For example, so in 2020, between 2020 and 2021, Red Bull used a B chassis. I think it was the RB16 and then RB16B.
Yeah.
So when does the new car start? If you carry over a chassis and if you carry over the same kind of car but just upgrade it throughout the season and into the next one and not build a new one, how would you even know what the new car is? How would you police that? Who knows when the new car starts? They definitely
find loopholes as well and start putting things on current cars that they want to use next year.
But they'll just say, these are just upgrades.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. If there's a huge change in regulations, it's easier to look at components. I mean, even now, they still use certain parts are still being used, from 2018-19 cars. I mean, the Williams steering wheel hasn't changed in about...
It's never changing.
Yeah.
I've seen their flaws.
But what I'm saying, you can't... Because unless there's a big change in regulations, a lot of these cars, they're just evolutions. They just continue to evolve. And so whether you stop... I just don't think it's ultimately what you're saying, Aldas. I don't think it's enforceable at all. And also you don't know how that's going to, yes, it might have an effect at the top. It also might have a detrimental effect to everyone else. And you can look at rule changes that, ultimately you can't have a rule change that isolates one team. That is literally against the merit of sport. You can create rule changes that you think are going to try and close things up a bit, but ultimately, you could end up really hurting. It's like when they made the floor changes
that was aimed at Mercedes.
Yeah, but it also hurt Racing Point because they copied the Mercedes. They got fucked by it as well. They were, and they were obviously pissed because they spent all the time copying the Mercedes and getting it in place. And ultimately, who knows where that car would have been if the floor changes. Like they were
like what
the
would the
quickest car the year before.
What would the 2021 Racing Point, would actually, or it would have been the Aston Martin. What would the first Aston Martin would be if they didn't have the floor changes? So
yeah,
it's just.
So I think what Lewis was suggesting, I don't think it's feasible.
Yeah, and even for, like you said, for the smaller team. So if you cap it, say if you stop development of your kind of current car midway through the season, like what about the last half of it? What about if you're pushing for 8, maybe 6th in the constructors? Because that's huge for the likes of maybe Williams or someone. What about
Haas through a whole season?
I was literally about to use the example.
So how does that work? Do you not develop your car at all for like half a season and just put all your resources for like that second half somehow? Like it's just, it's not only, it's difficult to police. It also, I think, confuses the sport even more. And like this Formula One is already a pretty confusing sport to like brand new fans. I think a lot of, there's been a huge influx like since Drive to Survive. So I think just to make it even more confusing for fans of the fact that you can't even develop a car, in the second half of the season because it's for next year, but you're not going to be able to see it until 6 months later. I think it's just too much. The sport is already overregulated as it is. I think simplification is that's the whole point of these regulations right now, isn't it? Like to make it more simple. There's more kind of shared components, and it's just. Yeah, I think Lewis's heart is in the right place, and I get where he's coming from to see kind of wanting to see the grid a bit more closer. But there's just too many holes in that.
I think if it was possible, it would actually be good, but it's not.
Yeah,
like it's actually just not.
If you look at it plain and simple.
Yeah, even if you you're gonna ban people like whipping out the spreadsheets to crunch the numbers for next season, like, you genuinely can't believe that. So
yeah, and they always want that. These people that work at these companies are so clever. They'll always find a loophole.
They're cleverer than the people writing the rules.
They are.
That's what we hear all the time. Like, even from people that have worked like within Formula One or within Formula One teams, the teams have more resources than Formula One. I think people actually forget that. They have more like, even when it comes to like law, the FIA kind of sets out their rule book, but the teams have like lawyers and like engineers basically looking for holes in there. I mean, that's what kind of...
It's like Joe Bauer, isn't it? Joe Bauer's like the head, like technical... got his work cut out, man.
He's always having a little...
That's a tough gig. Like keeping up with all 10 F1
It's just him though. Like, it's literally always just him.
Yeah.
Someone give him some help, man.
Someone help him. Get an apprentice.